Hey, this is Regina White Favors with a new series. The series is titled What Do You Bring to the Table? And it is part of the Overcoming Rebound Relationships curriculum and then also the Toxic Encounters books. And you can find those tabs marked as rebounding and also toxic encounter books on my website, reginawhitefavors.com. So, this particular series I thought is very interesting because there's this sort of ongoing social media discussion concerning men asking women what do they bring to the table, and it segues into conversations about submission and how most men want a submissive wife or partner. They're not always inclined to transition the individual into becoming a wife, but they want the individual or the woman to be submissive. And so it has transitioned into those types of discussions of submission and also tradition, that they want a traditional wife. And many people define tradition or a traditional wife as someone who cooks and cleans and stays at the house. They tend to be a housekeeper, homekeeper, a housewife. But I noticed that there's an irony to the discussion about what do they bring to the table, because most men who ask that question tend to label themselves or categorize themselves as alpha men, and they still, when a woman responds with the fact that she makes a certain income or she works a certain job or she has education, the men will say, well, that's not important to alpha men, right? Or that's not important to men just in general. And the irony that I find very interesting is that these men want a traditional submissive wife, but they also want her to work. They don't want the 50s, 40s, 50s type of wives who stayed home where the man went out and he was the breadwinner. What they want is still the woman to work and still the woman to be able to tend to the home, tend to the husband in a very traditional way, not have any true independence or anything like that. But when a woman says, well, she makes a certain amount of money or she has education, they sort of mock and scorn and look down on that. So I've been thinking about this series for a good while and just kind of listening to discussions and being sort of turned off by those discussions, as well as wondering, I mean, do people really know what they want? The most important thing that people need to understand is that you are always 100% responsible for yourself. So that means you need to do all that you need to do to ensure that you establish you. Just because someone decides to get an education or make a lot of money doesn't mean that they think that person is better than you. That's what you're supposed to do as an adult. You're supposed to leave your parents' home, get a job, go to school, get your own apartment, get a house, get a car, pay bills. That's what you're supposed to do. And so this discussion about what do you bring to the table is something that I want to explore. I don't know if I'm going to turn it into a script or something, but I have created a workbook companion that I'm going to introduce you to in a few slides. So this is what do you bring to the table, and this is preparing your table for engagement. And your table for engagement depends on where you are in your development. If you are preparing your table for engagement, if you are in your 30s or your 40s, well, it is, you've likely already received your education or completed your education, and so now you are already establishing yourself. So now you are at a 30s mindset, or if you're in your 40s, you're at a 40s mindset. So how you perceive the world and how you engage with another person is going to be a lot different than the person who is in their 20s, right? So preparing your table means whatever it means in terms of the particular topics we're going to discuss, but also just your table in terms of your mindset. your mentality about relationships, about relationship building. If you're the type of person who quits relationships after a certain time and you don't have a record of staying in a relationship longer than 6 months, that is your table. And so you're going to have to really address that part of your um, emotional development. So this is, what do you bring to the table? Preparing your table for engagement. So the curriculum is based upon the research I did for rebounding and rebound relationships. And that research you can find under the rebounding tab. And the rebound relationship research focuses on understanding the table. So this is the table that we're at as two partners. One of the partners is a rebound, and the other partner is a member of a core relationship. And so when you are engaging in relationships, especially romantically, and you don't know that the partner is already engaged with someone else, and that can be as in marriage, or it can be just in a long-term relationship, it's time to really think about what's going on with the table that you're sitting at. So that's understanding the table. And then the Toxic Encounters books um, do derive from that research. And so I go over that at the end of the presentation here. But it's Overcoming Rebound Relationships curriculum, and it is when you need to leave the table. So the three books, three titles under the series, the Bait, Hook, and Switch series, focus on rebound relationships, why people pursue them, focuses on also adult attachment, and then encourages the reader to go no contact. So this is the curriculum in addition to the workbook companion. So here's the workbook companion. What do you bring to the table? This is the series, and then this is taking many of the ideas that I have in this presentation and putting it into book form. So it's about 130 pages, and it is available on Amazon. Can two walk together unless they agree? Table. And that's a very important thing because that's a biblical reference here. And it's Amos 3:3, can two walk together unless they agree? And it's just essentially, if you look at it from the spiritual terms, biblical terms, basically, uh, God is, suggesting don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers, right? Uh, why would a person who is a Christian marry a person who is a Muslim? Sure, you have people who think, democratically, that we're all free to marry whoever we want to marry. However, God thinks, theocratically, right? We may be, democratic. He's theocratic. And so, however God defines marriage in terms of how the two parties are going to come together, is all based upon the tenets of the Bible in terms of walking together unless they agree. Um, Now, put that off to the side just for a minute. I may return to it. If we have two people in a relationship, say we have two people in a marriage, and hopefully they got this clear before the marriage. We have one person who wants kids, and then we have one person who does not want kids. Okay, and suppose we say one of the partners voiced their concern to marriage. Usually it can be a male, it could be the husband, I mean the man, or it could be the woman. But let's just say it's the man. He says he doesn't want to have kids. Okay. And so then you get into the marriage, you really do want to have kids, and you claim that you're going to respect his wishes, but somehow you decide to not take your birth control, or um, something happens with another contraception or something like that, and then you end up having a child, or you get pregnant and you tell him and you're happy and he's not happy. And now you are offended because Now you're in this mindset, okay, so you don't want my child, you don't want our child, this is our child, we made this child together. But he already told you at the beginning, prior to the marriage, that he didn't want to have kids. He didn't necessarily have to give you a reason why he didn't want to have kids. He just said he didn't want to have kids. So then why put him in that position to now abandon a child? You can't play victim and say, yeah, but that's different. How we thought back then was different. Now the child is here. He's responsible. Sure, by court, by law, he would definitely be responsible, but that's unfair. So you knew before the marriage that you wanted to have kids, and you knew before the marriage that he didn't want to have kids. And if you two were not in agreement before marriage, why did you get married? You shouldn't have gotten married. What you should have done was grieve that relationship, exit the relationship, grieve it, wait, get some healing, get some therapy, and wait for the right partner, the person who actually wants to have kids. That's it. It is very simple. As much as we like to say it is not that simple, and you can't help who you love, and things could change. And no, you walked in disagreement from the beginning. You can't get into the marriage and say, "Oh, you changed. Oh, things have changed now. Let's accept this child." Oh, I believe a person who says they never wanted a child will always have that at the back of their heart, even if the child born and the person who didn't want the child looks into the child's eyes, holds the baby, and learns to love the baby. I still think on some level that person, that parent, newly parent who didn't want to be a parent, is going to resent that child, and is going to resent you. And somewhere down the road, there's going to be a division. There's going to be conflict, and someone is going to leave the relationship. It is better to walk in agreement before you get into that relationship or that marriage. You don't wait until you get into the relationship to walk in agreement. If you two do not agree on a particular really vital, substantial area of marriage, then you should rethink your decision to marry. Now, if you rethought your decision to marry, you separated from each other, and you went your way and he went his way, and then 2 years later he has a change of heart, and not because he's trying to get you back, but he just has a change of heart. He's now ready. Okay, that's different. Now you are walking in agreement. But if you try to make someone do something, they're always going to resent you, and they're always somehow, in their resenting you, they have now created a foot out of the relationship, and they may take vengeance, they may retaliate. The person might decide to go and have an affair with someone else as a way of teaching you a lesson, and also as a way of punishing you for making them become something that they didn't want to do. They didn't want to become that, and you're trying to make them. There's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than a partner in a relationship, in a marriage with you, who is miserable from the very beginning. And you don't know that the person is miserable. You don't really know that. Somehow they put on a face, they put on an actor's face, and sometimes you can go out to eat. You can go to Applebee's, you can go to Denny's, you can go to the fair, you can go to a number of things. But on the inside of them, the person always feels like you made them do something that they didn't want to do. I had a certain situation with an ex, and he refused to let go of his relationship with his ex, even though she let him go, moved him out. They were all already broken up. She was trying to come back and forth into our relationship, and he just wouldn't let her go. And it wasn't until after I had to make a final decision about the relationship and let him go for good that I realized we were never in agreement. It didn't matter that we had sex. It didn't matter that I cooked food for him. It didn't matter that we went to the grocery store. It didn't matter that we went to little outings, to the movies, talked, laughed, uh, did other types of things, called each other. It didn't matter. He was never in agreement with the relationship that he had with me. His heart was always with the woman who didn't want him. and and it would have been better to leave him alone when I found out he was still talking to her, let time pass by, and possibly later, if he was ready, come back into the relationship with me. But he was never he we were never in agreement. And I remember seeing him sit at a desk in the house, in a previous house. And I just looked at him, and something about him just really bothered me or turned me off, and I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until maybe a year or so out of the relationship, out of the situation, that I realized he was miserable. He didn't act like he was miserable in terms of uh, emotional. He kept his emotions, regulated or whatever. But when I think about and reflect on the situation, he was miserable. It doesn't necessarily mean that I caused misery, that I was miserable to be with. It's just that we never were in agreement. He never wanted to be in relationship with me. He wanted to be in relationship with her, and he was using me to soothe and calm and as a distraction, and then and have to say as a rebound, until she decided that she was going to come back around, and she never did. And so then he felt stuck. And once you have a person who feels stuck and feels like they have to accept the situation, and he could have made a decision to leave. He is still 100% responsible as an adult, but he didn't have any plans himself. So then he had to stay with me. And then and then here it is. I'm walking and thinking that we're in agreement and that we're going somewhere, and we're just basically on a hamster's wheel. We're not going anywhere. We're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And once I realized that he was never going to let go of that situation, I had to let him go. So then getting out of disagreement with him brought agreement with myself, that I had to prioritize myself. I had to set better standards, boundaries, and expectations for myself and with myself. And from that situation, I'm still now undergoing my healing process. And so now my agreement is with me, and with what God thinks of me, and what God wants for my life, and what God believes is best for me. And it's better for me, as I walk in agreement with that I wait, that I continue to work on my tables, whatever those tables are. Those are your financial tables, health tables, mental, all those different types of tables, that I continue to work on those tables, and that I fully endure and overcome and recover from the situation, so that I no longer walk in disagreement with people who don't want to be with me. That's a hard story to tell, and I actually tell it in multiple books in different types of ways. But can two walk together unless they agree is something that you really have to have the courage to make the decision about, because again, you can be in situations uh, that are no longer working, that are completely dysfunctional, but you're trying to make dysfunction functional, and it's never going to work. It's never going to work. Eventually that person is going to leave. Eventually that person, something on the inside of that person is just going to turn on. It's like a light switch. It's just going to turn on, and they're going to leave. I had a previous situation that I know. I didn't have this situation, but I know of a person. I don't want to name the person, But one day, her partner, who is now her ex-partner, just decided to come home one day, come to her house, her apartment, come home one day, pack all his stuff, and leave. And what that tells me is that he never really intended to stay in a relationship. So that means they were never in agreement. He goes and marries someone else many, many years later, uh, and he gets hurt on the job, and then uh, that person decides to visit him in the hospital only once and never came back. So he left one person to be with another person, and that person decided to leave him. And then many years later, because of his heart from the previous types of situations, he does exactly to a new person what he did to a previous person, what another person did to him. So now we have all of these different tables in disagreement because people don't know how to make a decision and stand by, have the courage to make the decision. If I have to lose out on this, what I believe is an opportunity, I'm just going to have to lose because we're not walking in agreement. I had another situation. I know another situation where the two people were going to come together, and then there was a separation, and then one person was crying over the other. And even though I feel like the person called that person, that other person, tried to get the relationship back, and then they end up married, but then they ended up divorced because the person, like my ex, was miserable. He didn't want to be in a relationship, or he was not ready for a relationship at that time, and that he needed time. And maybe if he had had the time that he needed for himself, by the time he met that person, he would have been still in that relationship, in marriage, 10, 15, 20 years on down the road. So can two walk together unless they agree? I really, that's a very hard question to ask. That's a question that will cause you to cry. There's a question that will cause you to really contemplate your purpose in life, especially if you don't get what you want. Here it is, you want this woman over here, but somehow things are not working out, it's not coming together, it's not gelling. You think that your heart is enough um for it to for the relationship to work, and it's just not going to work. It's just not. No matter what you do, you can pray it, you can sex the person, you can do all that you can. You can have all the money in the world. Tom Brady and Giselle Bundchen uh finally divorced, right? And so of course they have all the money in the world, but she wanted him out of the NFL and she wanted him more at home, right? So that they can come together as a family. Well, he decided that he would be more miserable outside of the NFL, and I don't know if he would have been miserable at home, but he wasn't ready to let go of the NFL. And I like to caution, well, you knew that you knew when you married him he was an NFL player, so why would you think that you're going to change that in him, right? As long as a person can run down, throw that ball, run down that field, especially men, they're going to do it until they're laid out on the field, right? Um, so a lot of times we get into these relationships expecting the person to change, like the current situation with Kevin Costner and his wife. Okay, she wanted him to quit one of the highest rated TV shows that just put him back on the map. She wanted him to quit that, but he's an actor, and you knew that when you got with him that he's an actor. Well, you can say the same thing about the two men that I mentioned, Brady and Costner. Well, you knew the types of women were the types of women who would rather you be at home. They want the money that you have. They want the status and prestige that you have, but they still want you home. And so if you have to get that straight early and not let people lie to you and say, "Oh, I'm okay with your career. Everything's all right. I got you." Don't let people lie to you. If they are not okay with your career, with what you're doing, You have to have the heart to tell yourself that, because no one can really do you wrong. Only you can do yourself wrong. And if you are putting yourself in situations where it is not conducive for you mentally, health wise, career wise, you're going to resent that person. You're going to be miserable with that person. Um, and it's not going to fare well for you. And some situations that you put yourself in, they can do some real damage to you. That person, being connected to that person, can do some damage to you. Being connected in that relationship in a hostile, conflict ridden, toxic uh, uh, family environment can do some damage to you. When I finally, right before I got out of the situation with the ex, and I found out that he had cheated the one more time before the very last time I made the decision, I was standing at the gate of the place we were living in, and I just needed to I just needed to take some time. I finished the conversation with her over the phone. She had called me to tell me that she was still sleeping around with my so-called man. And I got off the phone with her, and I stepped outside, and I walked down to the end of the apartment place, and I stood at the gate, like the backyard gate or something, and I felt, I kid you not, I felt my breath leave me. I felt breath leave me. Not like in a typical sigh, not like in typical inhale, exhale. It's like I opened my mouth and breath left me. And I knew that I was going to have to get out of that situation, and I didn't know how I was going to have to get out of the situation. But the fact that we were never in agreement in the first place contributed to the health issues that I would have later in the situation, and then contributed further to the the breath leaving me. And then once I got him out for good, when people say there's a thin line when it comes to your mind, your sound mind and insanity, I felt like my mind, if I didn't catch it, I felt like my mind was almost leaving me. And that's such a hard, when I say that, I don't even, sometimes I'm not even sure if I really truly understand what I'm saying. But I felt like my mind, and I had to catch it. It's like I had an awareness. You know how some people, you'll see someone who's having like a mental health episode, and they're doing a strange laugh, like this strange kind of laugh that's coming out of them. That's the way it felt. Like my mind was on its way to leaving itself, and I had to realize what was going on and catch it before it did. And that began the journey towards staying out of those types of relationships. Staying out, I should never have been in it in the first place. It was never what I was supposed to be in. And it took some time. And now that situation ended in 2016. We're in 2023. It is now in 2023 that I am actually entering a healing process. That I'm actually that I am committed to a healing process, a true healing process, that I'm not willing to engage in any more relationships of any kind until I get healed, until God heals me, until God heals my broken understanding. And the healing is about your your broken understanding about something, your distorted vision. Why are you staying in relationships that no longer serve you? Why are you staying in relationships that are detrimental to your psyche? Why are you staying in relationships that are abusive, that can kill you, that you have stayed too long beyond your grace? Why are you still staying in those relationships? You are no longer in agreement, in the sense that you don't want to be treated that way. But when you think about it, If you're still staying in those relationships when they are detrimental and your life is at stake, then you are walking in agreement with the way that person is treating you. Because if someone hits you, and this is not blaming the victim, but if someone hits you and you don't fight back or accept the hit or challenge the hit or try to address it or something like that, and you continue to stay in that type of relationship, you are walking in agreement with that person hitting you. It was something like an Ike Turner interview that he gave about when he used to hit Tina Turner. He would say, "Oh, she was looking so sad, and so I would hit her to get her happy." Well, she stayed in that relationship many years until she had to make the decision that she no longer wanted to be in agreement with his choice of domestic violence towards her. He looked at it, his perception of the relationship was one perception, that I needed to make her happy. So the way that I need to make her happy is to hit her. And her perception of the relationship was, he keeps hitting me and I'm not happy. That's why I'm truly not happy, because he keeps hitting me. And so once she came to an understanding, whatever that understanding is for her, once she came to an understanding about that and she made a decision to exit and leave, that's when she began to be in agreement with herself. She walked out of agreement with him and she walked in agreement with herself, and and any other thing that she did. And so, can two walk together unless they agree? Is something that you truly have to address with yourself. You do have the right to set life plans and boundaries with yourself, but you don't have the right to manipulate somebody as you set your life boundaries and plans. If a, Going back to the kid situation, if a person does not want to have kids, and I'm not talking about the people the men who go and have sex with you, they don't tell you in the beginning that they don't want to have kids, but then they go and have sex with you, and then you get pregnant, and then all of a sudden they say they don't want to have kids. I'm not talking about those people. That's manipulation. That's just straight evil. I'm talking about the people who have had a conversation with you at the very beginning prior to the marriage. They said they did not want to have kids. You both had a conversation at the table. Whether you were eating at a restaurant, whether you were eating at the house, it doesn't matter. You had the conversation. The person said to you that he or she does not want to have kids. You cannot make that person then want to become a parent. So when that person tells you that, and um is very disappointing to you, then you're going to have to take you and your disappointment and exit that relationship, because you are no longer in agreement. Because down the road, at the end of the road, if you force that situation into a marriage and then you end up having a kid and something happens, I don't think you're really going to keep that relationship. You can be married 25 years and something shuts off in the person in the 26th year and you divorce. It happens all the time. I truly never understood people who've been married 35, 40 years, 59 years, and then they divorce in the 59th year. And I think to myself, well, you might as well go over to the 60th year. And if you go over to the 60th year, then maybe you'll stay together for 61, 62, 63. But no, because whatever understanding that they had in the beginning, they didn't get a very good understanding. It's like the people who stay together for the kids. And then once the kids leave and go to college, they go on ahead and separate and divorce. Okay, well, why is it that you stay together? You might divorce then. And I understand they stayed together for the kids. But if you would have gotten a good understanding and not tried to get married to leave your parents' house, or try to get married because this man has a job and you didn't have the job, or get married because you wanted uh, a person with a house or something. Okay, if you make the decision and say, you know what, he doesn't want to get married. There's no sense in us staying in a relationship because I really want to get married. If you make that decision, you will fare better. You will hurt for a while, but you will fare a lot better. So I'm gonna stop here because I can really go on with this. But can two walk together unless they agree? Table is the one that is probably next to the financial table that deserves a lot more time at the table. That deserves a lot. I cannot stress that enough. That deserves a lot more conversation at the table, so that you know that you both have a connection, that you're both compatible, and that you both have the same understanding about the marriage or the things or who we are and how we're going to bring our finances together, and what purpose we're going to serve and what life assignment, that you are in agreement. And the agreement, if you are a Christian, Bible believing Christian, is always going to be that sort of triangle: is God top, um, and I forgot what it's called. It's threefold marriage or something like that. But it's not only going to be the triangle, but hierarchical, right? So God over husband, husband over wife, and so that too is one of those types of questions about agreement, about um, obedience and servitude, and that's not in the in old property language, but just understanding how things are done biblically. So that's a conversation for another day. But can two walk together unless they agree? So these are the toxic encounter books that I mentioned earlier. This is Toxic Encounters: Why People Pursue Rebound Relationships, Part 1. Then Toxic Encounters: Adult Attachment and the Problem with Rebounding, Part 2. And then Toxic Encounters: Why You Should Go No Contact Post Rebounding, Part 3. So this is part of the Overcoming Rebound Relationship curriculum. And these were the three initial books in terms of research, where I go over um, rebound relationships, how it relates to adult attachment, and that's why we tend to stay in those types of relationships, because we become attached. Is usually an insecure attachment, and you can chart the insecure attachment from your childhood to your adulthood. Then, of course, going no contact. Visit, subscribe, and follow. So this is the standard logo for the Regina White Favors website. And so you can also visit me on Facebook, Arthur Regina White Favors, YouTube, Regina White Favors channel, and then our Amazon Arthur page, amazon.com /Arthur Regina White Favors. Thank you very much for listening.